This is the Music History In-Depth podcast for August 14th through the 20th. On this week's show, a legendary video is recorded, a legendary music festival happens, two kings and a queen die, plus we throw in a little science for you. Kurt Cobain was born on February 20th, 1967 in Aberdeen, Washington. Kurt's parents divorced when he was 9 years old, which caused him to behave badly. He started acting out in school, bullying kids, until he himself started to be bullied once he started hanging out with the misfits during high school. Kurt was kicked out of his mother's house when he was 18 years old. He drifted into a couple of relationships, including one with Tracy Miranda, who the song About a Girl is about, and Toby Vale of Bikini Kill, and whose relationship the vast majority of the album Nevermind is about. In fact, once Vale's bandmate, Kathleen Hanna, spray-painted Kurt Smells Like Teen Spirit on Kurt's wall. Teen Spirit was the deodorant that Vale used. And now you know where the song title comes from. Kurt met Chris Novoselic while practicing in a rehearsal space. They formed the band Nirvana, the name of which was taken from a Buddhist concept, as Kurt was into religion at the time and wanted what he called, quote, a beautiful name, end quote. They also called themselves Skid Row for a little while, except that there was already a very popular hair band of the same name, so that wasn't going to work out long term. Even though Nirvana is known as a classic three-piece lineup, they actually had Jason Everman playing rhythm guitar in 1989. They went through a few more drummers as well. Aaron Burkhardt played drums in 1987. In 1988, they went through Dale Crover until they lost touch with him when they moved to Tacoma, Washington, and also Olympia, Washington. Remember, kids, this was pre-internet and cell phones were still for extremely rich people. Back then, when you lost touch with somebody, you really lost touch with somebody. They eventually did get back in touch with Dale, but in the meantime, they found Dave Foster and then Chad Channing. Channing played drums on their EP Bleach. Channing didn't last too long. Then, after borrowing Dan Peters from the group Mudhoney, they got Dave Grohl, and that move cemented Nirvana's classic lineup of Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic, and Dave Grohl. Nirvana had 3 session musicians playing on their albums. Mark Pickerel played drums in 1989. Kirk Canning and Kira Shaley both played cello, Kirk in 1991 and Kira in 1993. They toured with 4 other musicians during the 93-94 tour. John Duncan played rhythm guitar, Laurie Goldston and Melora Krieger played cello, and Pat Smear played rhythm guitar. After the demise of Nirvana, Pat and Dave Grohl went on to form another group that was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a few years ago, the Foo Fighters. In 1988, Nirvana put out some music on Seattle's independent record label Sub Pop. Their first single was their version of Shocking Blue's Love Buzz. They recorded their EP Bleach for $606.17 and released it on Sub Pop, who they had signed a contract with by then. They also recorded an EP called Blue, but a couple of things changed their history. The first was that Sub Pop didn't do a lot to promote Bleach, even though it was selling at a decent clip. And that did not sit well with the band, whose demos had started making the rounds at the major record labels. Eventually, they ended up signing with DGC Records. The other thing was that Kurt and Chris did not like Chad's style of playing, and Chad wanted to write more music, and one thing led to another, and Channing was out, and then they got the Dan Peters to fill in while they did 7 opening gigs with the group Sonic Youth, and then looked for a new drummer, and that's when they found Dave Grohl. So, in 1991, Nirvana got to work on their next album, which they recorded down in California. They decided that they needed to make a music video for their first song off of the album, Smells Like Teen Spirit. The band wanted a director who didn't have that slick corporate smell to him, so they settled on Samuel Bayer. Then they got a soundstage in Culver City, California, put out some advertisements for extras, and even invited their fans to show up for the video shoot during a concert a couple days earlier in the area. On Saturday, August 17th, 1991, the band got to work shooting the video. The video storyline was a concert at a high school that turned into total anarchy. They threw in shots of a janitor, who was played by trivia answer Tony De La Rosa, along with cheerleaders dressed in black to drive the point home about anarchy. The big problem with the shoot was how long the extras had to sit there on the bleachers without moving. For those of you unfamiliar with making videos, it sometimes takes forever. You have to do take after take after take, and these extras had to sit there for a really long time. By the time they were allowed to get up and film the total anarchy scene, the kids were feeling it. They unleashed and turned the shoot into a mosh pit, which is exactly what Kurt Cobain had wanted in the first place. What Kurt didn't want was the original edit to the video. He hated it. In fact, he hated it so much that he had it re-edited. He even added that shot towards the end of himself screaming into the camera. Finally, his edit was done and the video was released. On September 29, 1991, MTV played Smells Like Teen Spirit for the first time. It ended up turning into one of those watershed moments in music, and especially for Generation X. It introduced grunge to the mainstream, and the mainstream ate it up. It jump-started Nirvana's career along with the Seattle grunge movement, allowing groups like Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden to follow. The video itself is considered one of the greatest music videos of all time, and it was all filmed on August 17th, 1991. Next, the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, better known as Woodstock, was a confluence of circumstances, aspirations, and artistic expression that transcended the boundaries of a mere music festival. It was also a cultural milestone, a defining moment in the 1960s counterculture, and a testament of the power of music to unite and inspire people. It was also that festival that all the baby boomers swear they were at, even though they really weren't. Conceived as a venture to fund a recording studio, the festival was the brainchild of a quartet of young idealistic business people: Michael Lang, Artie Kornfeld, John Roberts, and Joel Rosenman. Their vision of a, quote, 3 days of peace and music, end quote, resonated with a generation that was seeking an alternative to the prevailing societal norms, we'll say. The initial plan to host the event at a location in Woodstock, New York, proved logistically impossible, and the festival was ultimately relocated to Max Yasgur's dairy farm in Bethel, a nearby town. Despite the 11th hour change in venue, the word had already spread and an estimated 500,000 people converged on the farm. The influx of humanity was unprecedented, overwhelming local infrastructure and straining resources. And yet, in the face of all those logistical challenges, a sense of communal spirit prevailed. Attendees shared food, water, and shelter, embodying the ideals of peace and love that the festival was meant to represent. At least that's the legend the grandparents like to tell you. Oh yeah, and because so many people crashed the event and got past the gates, organizers announced that it was a free festival. Musically, Woodstock was a kaleidoscope of talent, from the opening soulful sounds of Mr. Richie Havens, who unexpectedly opened the show, to the guitar heroics of Jimi Hendrix at the last day of the show. The lineup was a virtual who's who of the era's most influential counterculture artists. The Who, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, Sly and the Family Stone, The Grateful Dead, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, among countless others, delivered performances that would eventually become legendary. Beyond the music, Woodstock was a celebration of art, fashion, and environmental consciousness. The festival was a petri dish for experimentation, you might say, as attendees pushed the boundaries of conventional dress, behavior, and self-expression, which is a really nice way of saying they didn't shower. The event also highlighted growing concerns about pollution and resource consumption as the sheer number of people on the farm placed an immense strain on the environment. Also, they didn't shower. However, the idyllic image of Woodstock often obscures the challenges and controversies that actually surrounded the event. Rain turned the farm into a muddy quagmire, and the lack of sanitation led to health concerns. Let's just be blunt. Conditions were really disgusting. The influx of people overwhelmed the local authorities, and there were instances of crime and other things. The media, both mainstream and counterculture, offered a mixed portrayal of the festival, with some emphasizing the peace and love, while others focused on the chaos and debauchery. Despite its imperfections, Woodstock remains a powerful symbol of a generation's hopes and dreams. It was a moment when music transcended all that commercialism and became a catalyst for social change. While the festival's legacy is pretty complex, to say the least, and definitely multifaceted, there is no denying the enduring impact on pop culture. Woodstock was more than just a concert. It was a cultural watershed that continues to resonate with audiences of all ages. Again, mainly because your grandparents swear that they were there even though they weren't. Listen, I grew up 4 hours away from there, and you would swear my entire town was at this thing from the way they all like to talk about it, even the ones who weren't born in the 1950s and 60s. Go figure. The organizers didn't even make money on the festival until they ended up selling the movie and soundtrack rights afterwards. That movie, by the way, became an award-winning documentary that's on one of the streaming services somewhere. At least the music was awesome. Woodstock, or the Woodstock Music Festival, or the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, depending on how you look at it, happened from August 15th through the 18th, 1969, and not in Woodstock. It was in Bethel, New York. Before we continue, we'd like to tell you about the Music History Today podcast, where we go over the events that happened on that particular day in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops every single day, including weekends, on this podcast network. Now, back to the Music History In-Depth podcast. It is time to talk about the lives and deaths of two kings and a queen. Ladies first. When you think of great singers whose work has stood the test of time, Aretha Franklin's has to be considered at least in the top 5. Rolling Stone magazine named her the greatest singer, male or female, of all time. The Queen of Soul had 77 songs hit the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart, 17 of which went top 10. She was the first female artist inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that was in its second class. She won 18 Grammy Awards and sold over 75 million records worldwide. She was a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, at least 12 honorary college degrees, including more than a few doctorates, and was given both the Grammy Legend Award and the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. She sang everything from gospel to pop to R&B to even classical music. Aretha was born on March 25, 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, and started out as a youngster singing gospel in her father C.L. Franklin's church in Detroit, Michigan. Her father was a minister who became a bit of a celebrity in the Detroit area due to his energetic sermons. Because of this, as a child, Aretha knew people such as gospel legend Mahalia Jackson, who sometimes even babysat her, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who she sang for before some of his rallies. Her childhood, despite knowing a lot of celebrities, was not an easy one. Her mom and dad divorced when she was 6 years old due to her father's multiple affairs, which you wouldn't think would happen if you were a Baptist preacher, but yeah. Her mom died when Aretha was 10 years old. By the time Aretha was 14, she already had 2 children of her own. When she turned 18, Aretha decided to switch from singing gospel music to R&B, following in her friend, singer Sam Cooke's footsteps. She first recorded with Columbia Records. In those 6 years, she only found mid-level success at best. In 1967, she went to Atlantic Records, and it was there where Aretha made her mark. Her first album at Atlantic, released on March 10th, was I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. That album had the hits I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You, Do Right Man, Do Right Woman, Baby, 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 and her signature song, Respect. The irony of singing this song about empowerment was at the exact same time Aretha was herself in an abusive marriage with her manager, Ted White, whom she finally divorced a couple years later. Aretha wanted to record with the famed Muscle Shoals rhythm section at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. She got to the studio and recorded I Never Loved a Man. Her recording session, though, only lasted for 1 day as her husband/manager got into a fist fight with Muscle Shoals owner Rick Hall on the very first day of recording. She left the next day. Still, the vocals for the song were finished on the first day, so they were put onto the song itself. Her signature song, Respect, was originally recorded by Otis Redding. Aretha and producer Jerry Wexler added the sax solo in the middle, and the Sock It To Me line was added by Aretha and her sister Carolyn. The album itself went to number 1 on Billboard's R&B chart and number 2 on the pop charts. The single Respect was number 1 on the pop chart, while the single I Never Loved a Man peaked at number 9. When it first came out, it was given decent reviews, except that some reviewers thought the musicians on the album could have been better. Time changes things. This album set the stage for Aretha's rise, with her next couple of albums cementing her legacy. Her next album, Aretha arrived only 5 months after her Atlantic debut album and had the hit Baby I Love You. Columbia Records, her former label, tried to capitalize on Aretha's newfound success by releasing a compilation album, Take a Look, only a month after the album Aretha Arrives on Atlantic came out. Unless you're a huge fan of Aretha's and you need every single thing she's ever put out, you could pretty much skip the compilation album. It's not that great. The album Lady Soul was her third album released by Atlantic in less than a year. Aretha started recording the album on February 16, 1967 at Atlantic Studios in New York City. Legendary producer Jerry Wexler was at the producing helm again for this album. Aretha had some star power, though, to help out on this one. Among the guys playing on guitar were Eric Clapton and Bobby Womack, and singing backup vocals on a couple of the songs were Aretha's sister, along with gospel singer and mother of Whitney Houston, Miss Cicely Houston. The big singles off of this album were You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, which was written by Carole King, Chain of Fools, and Since You've Been Gone. The album was released on January 22, 1968, and went to number 2 on the Billboard Albums chart. Lady Soul is considered one of the greatest albums of all time on a lot of different best-of lists. Her next albums, Aretha Now and Aretha in Paris, kept her on a roll with hits like Rock Steady and Daydreaming. Then she started hitting speed bumps with a bunch of her albums towards the end of the 1970s. At the end of 1979, Aretha and Atlantic Records parted ways. In 1980, Aretha signed with legendary record label head Clive Davis's label, Arista Records. Her first act with the new label was to film her part in the Blues Brothers movie. Her 1980 album Aretha did okay and yielded the hits United Together and her version of Otis Redding's song I Can't Turn You Loose. Her follow-up, Love All the Hurt Away, did pretty well, becoming her first gold record in years. Her 1982 album, Jump to It, did even better, with the song Jump to It becoming a huge hit. 1985's album Who's Zoomin' Who was her breakout album of the Arista Records era. Aretha by now had switched her sound to a more pop sound. It worked like a charm, with big hits like Freeway of Love with the saxophone of the late great Clarence Clemons of Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. She also had big hits Who's Zoomin' Who and her worldwide hit duet with George Michael, I Knew You Were Waiting for Me. Who's Zoomin' Who was the zenith of Aretha's post-Atlantic career, going platinum. In 1987, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. After that, while she did albums that were mid-level in terms of sales, she settled into legend status during tours and special performances. There was, for instance, the 1988 Grammy Awards, where she filled in for opera sensation Luciano Pavarotti, who was ill the night of the ceremony. The ceremony producers asked Aretha to step in and perform the aria Nessun Dorma, which she had performed with Pavarotti only a couple of nights earlier at a charity function. Aretha rehearsed with the orchestra for a little while, figured that she could sing it in the key that the orchestra already knew it in, and then delivered a performance of the ages that night that is still talked about to this day, which garnered her an extremely long-standing ovation from the Grammy audience. Who knew that Aretha could sing opera? Wow. As the new century rolled on, Aretha continued touring, but her health concerns began to take their toll. She ended up canceling shows and shortening tours. Her final full concert was held on September 3rd, 2017, although she did give one more performance for Elton John's AIDS charity concert on November 7th, 2017. Aretha announced performance dates for 2018, but the dates were postponed, never to be fulfilled. On August 16th, 2018, on the same day in history on which the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, passed away in 1977, the world lost the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, at the age of 76. Speaking of Elvis Presley, let's talk about the king of rock and roll. It is said that there were 4 phases to Elvis's career. The first was when he burst onto the scene, full of youth and vigor, shaking his hips, outraging the parents and stealing the hearts of their daughters. The second was when he was drafted into the U.S. Army, came out and did movies. Really bad movies when you watch them now, but you kind of look at them fondly as the product of a bygone era. The third stage started when he finished his Hollywood phase and went back to performing on June 27, 1968, when the King came back and recorded his NBC Comeback television special. We did a deep dive on this event about 6 podcasts ago, give or take, 1 or 2. After the success of the special, Elvis started to do concerts again. At this time, though, his young marriage to Priscilla Presley started to deteriorate. He also started taking what doctors were giving him. He had been against the kinds of stimulants that normal rock and rollers were into, but felt like a lot of people that if a doctor gave you other ones, then they weren't illegal and it was okay to take. At least in Elvis's mind, that was what his thinking was. The Presleys divorced in 1973, which started phase 4 of his career. By then, his health was in a tailspin. He twice ended up in the hospital in 1973 from what his doctors were giving him. He kept touring during the entire time, found himself a new girlfriend, but he really wasn't the same. According to members of his band, he would fall out of the limo, taking him to the performances, not being able to stand up. He would lean against the microphone, slurring the words to his songs sometimes. He gained weight, a lot of weight. In short, Elvis was in a bad way, and usually in that weird white jumpsuit. His record label became concerned. Not so much about his health, really, but because he wasn't into recording albums anymore, and that was making them a lot of money, so His bodyguards started to speak out, but much like what happens when people speak out about such matters, his bodyguards lost their jobs. A book that those bodyguards wrote about their time with Elvis was released only 16 days before his passing, a book that Elvis actually had tried to have stopped, but to no avail. In 1977, Elvis embarked on a cross-country tour. He started on February 12th in Hollywood, California, and then swung east for a bunch of shows before going to Hawaii for a vacation in early March. After his vacation, he went back out on the road before he had to cancel some shows due to a stay in Baptist Memorial Hospital on March 31st. At that time, the press were told that it was for fatigue and an intestinal flu. April and May saw him hit the road strong, crisscrossing the country back and forth. Elvis took the first couple of weeks in June off before doing a bunch of shows in the last 2 weeks of the month. He played Kansas City, Missouri, Omaha, Nebraska, Rapid City, South Dakota, Madison, Wisconsin, and Cincinnati, Ohio. On June 26, 1977, Elvis played at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was an 8:30 show. He walked out on stage to classical composer Richard Strauss's masterpiece, also Sprach Zarathustra, Opus 30, a.k.a. the theme music for the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then he went into C.C. Rider Blues, I've Got a Woman, Amen, Love Me, Fairy Tale, You Gave Me a Mountain, Jailhouse Rock, It's Now or Never, Little Sister, Teddy Bear, Don't Be Cruel, Release Me, I Can't Stop Loving You, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Early Morning Rain, What I Say, Johnny Be Good, I Really Don't Want to Know, Hurt, Hound Dog, and finished off with Can't Help Falling in Love. Elvis walked off the stage. The announcer gave the traditional, "Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building." And that was it. 21 songs, the vast majority of them being cover songs. He gave one of the best performances of the year. What people couldn't have known at the time, including Elvis, was that it was the last performance that he would ever give. Elvis went back home to Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, and there he was supposed to rest up and then start the next leg of his tour. He was scheduled to start back up with 2 shows in Portland, Maine, then have shows in Utica, Syracuse, and Uniondale, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Lexington, Kentucky, Roanoke, Virginia, Fayetteville, and Asheville, North Carolina, before finally finishing the month with 2 shows at the Mid-South Coliseum in his hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. Those shows never happened. The end for Elvis came in a pretty undignified way. On August 16, 1977, while sitting on the toilet in his Graceland mansion, Elvis suddenly had massive pain, stood up for a second, then fell forward, face down. He tried to struggle, but to no avail. His new girlfriend found him, but although attempts were made to revive him, his heart couldn't battle anymore. Elvis Presley was pronounced dead from a heart attack brought on by an enlarged heart at 3:30 p.m. on August 16, 1977. After that, of course, came the tributes. Over 100,000 people came to Graceland the next day to pay their respects. 2 small funeral services were held at the mansion on August 18th and 19th, and then his body was originally moved to a mausoleum at Forest Hill Midtown Cemetery later that day on August 19th. His mother was moved there a week later on August 27th. She had passed away a couple decades ahead of time. At the service on August 18th, Minister C.W. Bradley said of Elvis, quote, "We are to honor the memory of a man loved by millions, But Elvis was a frail human being, and he would be the first to admit his weaknesses. Perhaps because of his rapid rise to fame and fortune, he was thrown into temptations that some never experience. Elvis would not want anyone to think that he had no flaws or faults. But now that he's gone, I find it more helpful to remember his good qualities, and I hope you do too. End quote. That could probably be said for just about a lot of people. On August 30th, 1977, 3 men were charged with trying to steal Elvis's body. The charges were later dropped due to the court not believing the police's key witness. At that point, Elvis's father made the decision to petition the city to allow Elvis and his mother to be buried at Graceland. On September 28, 1977, the request was granted, and on October 3, 1977, Elvis and his mother's bodies were moved to their final resting place at Graceland. For those of you who wonder who the other celebrities were who passed away around that time, aka the celebrities always die in threes theory, and you actually stretch that theory a little bit to the following 4 months, there were actually 3 other huge legends who passed away right around that time. Legendary comedian Groucho Marx of the Marx Brothers passed away 3 days after Elvis on August 19th during one of his funeral services. Iconic entertainer Bing Crosby passed away on October 4th from a heart attack after playing a round of golf. And the immortal legend of the silver screen, famed actor Charlie Chaplin, passed away on Christmas Day, 1977. And there are your all celebrities die in threes. Technically 4 on that one. The death of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, on August 16th, 1977, at the age of 42. There is one more king whose life we should celebrate, since we've spoken about the Queen of Soul and also the King of Rock and Roll. Let's go with King of the Delta Blues. Robert Johnson is one of those artists who, when it comes to his life at least, it is really tough to tell fact from fiction. That's because not a lot of his life was documented. In death, he has obtained legendary, almost mythical status. Here's what's known about him. He was born on May 8, 1911 in Mississippi. In 1929, he was married, but his wife died soon thereafter while giving birth to their child. It was at that point that Robert decided to become a blues guitarist. He fathered a child with another woman and married yet another one, who again died while in childbirth. From 1932 to 1938, Robert helped to develop and define the Delta Blues by playing virtually every single juke joint from Memphis all the way down to Mississippi. Robert was quite the ladies' man, with literally a woman in every city, with none of them knowing about the other ones. Remember, kids, no internet or social media at that time to put anyone on blast. No, that is not an admirable trait. Don't even think about doing that. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Just saying. Anywho, for all his playing, Robert released very few records. On November 23rd through the 25th, 1936, in San Antonio, Texas, Robert recorded what would become the recordings that he would be known for. Supposedly, Robert was so shy that he faced the wall while recording. One of those recordings was Crossroad Blues, which Eric Clapton would do a couple of versions of with his various groups. Eric just shortened the title to Crossroads. It was also the song that would become pivotal to his legend after his death in 1938. Of the many myths and legends about Robert, probably the most famous one, concerns his deal with the devil at a local crossroads, which is supposedly at the intersection of Route 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And that was where he supposedly sold the devil his soul so that he could gain success. There's even a statue where the event supposedly took place. Robert's friends and relatives have said that he made the deal with the devil by playing secular blues music instead of gospel, and that his wife's dying while in childbirth was his punishment. There was also talk by locals that Robert got his gift by going to grave sites at night and becoming infused with the talent of the dead, who apparently played some damn good guitar. While it's a great story, and let's be nice and just say, without the whole QAnon thing, that it is extremely debatable, it did lead to the aforementioned song called Crossroad Blues, so at least a great song came out of the story. Even his death is shrouded in mystery, as he supposedly died from unknown causes on August 16, 1938, with no autopsy and with no public announcement. Some people say that he was poisoned by a jealous husband or boyfriend of one of his many conquests while performing in a bar a few nights before. That, kids, is why you don't have a woman in every city or port or whatever. Just saying. Besides, these days, someone's putting you on blast. Don't believe me? Go to a Coldplay concert. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, other people say that the devil was the one who killed him because he came to collect on his deal. It is also ironic, given the story, that even if the story about him selling his soul to the devil in order to gain success is actually true, and that's a big if, I might add, then Johnson's success didn't actually come until long after he had passed away on August 16, 1938, at the age of 27, because it was actually the re-release of the King of the Delta Blues Singers LP in 1961 and Robert's box set, The Complete Recordings, back in 1990, that actually gave Robert his newfound notoriety and his biggest success. Now, after his life and death are surrounded in myth, his influence on the genre of rock and roll is unquestionable. I mean, when you think about Delta Blues, for instance, you think about Robert Johnson. He basically branded it, perfected it, and made it what it is today. I would highly suggest that at the very least you go get the 1990 box set, The Complete Recordings. It is a must-have in any music lover's collection, and it really doesn't cost a whole lot. It has like maybe 40 songs on it, and at last check, the entire box set sold for somewhere around $20, $25 or so. These days, you can also stream it, but try to own it because the liner notes alone make this box set worth the purchase. Just a little advice. Robert's guitar playing on his Gibson guitar actually made it sound like he was playing two guitars, and his singing style, by making his pitch swing up and down, made him one of the supreme innovators of music in general, and especially rock music, as it turns out. His slide guitar work is the stuff of legend, and in 27 years, Robert Johnson impacted not only blues music, but rock music and popular music as we know it today. The mysterious death of the king of the Delta Blues, blues great and Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Robert Johnson, who passed away on August 16th, 1938. Now, there were some birthdays that we were going to celebrate in full, such as a legendary frontman for Led Zeppelin, Mr. Robert Plant, who was born on August 20th, 1948, and who, of course, also had an amazing solo career. There was also the Material Girl, Madonna, born August 20th, 1977, who we actually spoke about a few podcasts back to celebrate the release of her debut album, and who we will talk about again in about 3 podcasts when it comes to the first MTV Video Music Awards. That's upcoming. There was also actor, comedian, and renowned banjo player Steve Martin, who was born on August 14th, 1945. Happy birthday to all 3. However, that would make this podcast really, really long. So, what we're going to do is we're going to finish off with a science lesson, actually. And we are going to celebrate the birthday of sorts, anyway, of a machine, in honor of our future overlords, provided that there hasn't been a nuclear holocaust by then. Back in the early 1960s, long before man had even gotten close to the moon, NASA realized that the planets would align themselves in the 1970s in such a way that a spacecraft could do a single flyby of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. That was pretty forward thinking on their part, since man was still trying to stay in space for longer than half a day at that point in space exploration. NASA decided to do 2 space probe missions, calling them Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. Voyager 2's main mission was to go by those 4 planets. Voyager 2 was launched on August 20th, 1977, and is still to this date going pretty strong. They're still getting signals out of it. Having now completed its primary mission, its new mission is to go to the farthest reaches of the solar system to find out what is out there. And as of this recording, it is 12.7 billion miles away and has been out of the solar system since 2018. Now, why on earth am I telling you all of this? Because this has nothing to do with music. Actually, it kind of does. And the reason why I'm telling you is because of what is on the Voyager spacecraft itself. On the spacecraft is a gold record. The record is basically a time capsule. It has photos of people and animals interacting, earth sounds like wind blowing and birds chirping, and it has music on it from different countries. It has a few cuts from Johann Sebastian Bach. It's got one from Amadeus Mozart, good old Wolfgang. One from Stravinsky, one from Beethoven, along with a Navajo tribe chanting a Peruvian wedding song, which I'm assuming is not Wayne Newton's Dunkashane, and other traditional ethnic music. The entries from the United States: Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, the only rock music cut to make the record, along with Louis Armstrong's Melancholy Blues. Why they didn't put West End Blues is beyond me. And Blind Willie Johnson's Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground. Carl Sagan, who helped to put the list together, actually wanted the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun to be put on there, which would make perfect sense and would be perfect. How could you not have the Beatles on there? Oh, I know how. Because EMI Records, who owned the copyright at the time, said no. Because why would you want your record to be a part of a truly historic event? This, kids, is why, record executives are just stupid sometimes. Like, really stupid. This is just further proof about how stupid they are. Anyway, what I really enjoy about this is that on the record is a drawing that's a set of instructions on how to play it. There's no record player with it because, well, why would you want to make it easy for the new overlords? It's like when you get a new toy or electronic device and then you realize that the batteries or the AC adapter don't come with the stupid thing. I'm imagining the aliens looking at the record like kids these days look at cassettes, cursing us, and then throwing the record around like a frisbee while their buddies are making plans to invade us. Great job, NASA. Anyway, the golden record and the space probe that it was put on, Voyager 2, launched into space on August 20th, 1977. And that is it for the Music History In-Depth podcast for August 14th through the 20th. Thank you very, very much for listening and or watching if you are watching this on either Spotify or YouTube.